They say charity begins at home, but what if home is where the greatest deception lies? What if the hands that offer compassion to the world are secretly siphoning funds for illicit desires? This isn't just a story about a husband's affair. It's about the chilling misuse of trust, the betrayal of a sacred cause, and the public unraveling of a life built on lies. Just wait until you see what I exposed at the most prestigious event of the year. My name is Lisa. For years, my life revolved around philanthropy. I was a well-known figure in the city, my name synonymous with compassion, integrity, and unwavering dedication to those in need. My days were filled with board meetings, fundraising events, and the quiet satisfaction of making a tangible difference in the world. My husband, Dr. Richard Hayes, was equally prominent. A renowned surgeon, his hands saved lives, his reputation was impeccable, and his presence exuded an aura of quiet authority. Together, we were a power couple, a beacon of hope and generosity in our community. Our marriage from the outside was a testament to shared values, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding love. I believed in him, in his dedication to his patients, in his commitment to our shared charitable endeavors. I was the woman who had it all, a fulfilling career, a loving husband, and the respect of my peers. Until the day the whispers began, not from the gossip columns, but from the subtle shifts in his behavior, the unsettling discrepancies in our shared financial landscape. Until the day the man I loved, the man I trusted, began to reveal the rot beneath the polished surface, a rot that threatened to consume not just our marriage, but the very causes we championed. It started subtly, like a faint, almost imperceptible tremor beneath the polished surface of our perfect lives. Richard, usually so meticulous, so present, began to drift. His late nights at the hospital became more frequent, his explanations more vague. He'd return home, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume, his eyes a little too bright, his smile a little too forced. I'd attribute it to the pressures of his demanding profession, the weight of his responsibilities as a prominent surgeon. He was under stress, I told myself, and I, as his supportive wife, needed to be understanding. But the emotional distance grew, a chasm opening between us that no amount of shared dinners or public appearances could bridge. Our conversations became superficial, devoid of the intimacy we once shared. He'd dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand, a patronizing smile, or a quick change of subject. I'd find myself staring at him across the dinner table, a stranger in my own home, wondering where the man I married had gone. The unease grew, a persistent hum beneath the surface of our perfect lives. It was like a tiny, persistent crack in a priceless piece of porcelain. Individually, each discrepancy was minor. Collectively, they began to form a dissonant chord, a subtle warning that something was fundamentally wrong with the harmony of my marriage and the integrity of our shared charitable endeavors. I noticed a new, almost possessive attachment to his phone, a quick flick of his wrist to hide the screen when I walked into the room. He started taking calls in private, his voice hushed, his demeanor guarded. He, who had always been so transparent, so open, was now shrouded in a veil of secrecy. And the more I observed, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a casual distraction. This was about a deliberate, calculated act of deception, a hidden life he was building, one secret at a time, outside the confines of our marriage and our shared values. My instincts, honed over years of managing large charitable funds, began to prickle. It wasn't just the emotional distance, it was the subtle shifts in our financial landscape. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint accounts, large sums spent on unfamiliar items, discrepancies in the charity fund reports that, while minor, were enough to raise a red flag. I'd pore over bank statements, cross-referencing them with our household expenses, our charitable donations, and his professional income. The numbers didn't add up. There were luxury purchases, designer handbags, expensive jewelry, lavish dinners that I had no knowledge of, items that certainly weren't for me. These weren't just small, personal indulgences. They were significant expenditures, enough to impact our joint finances, and more disturbingly, the charity funds we managed together. He, who had always been so meticulous with our shared finances, was now sloppy, leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs that, to my trained eye, screamed of illicit activity. I noticed a new, almost frantic energy around his personal investments, a sudden interest in ventures he had previously dismissed. He started taking calls in private, his voice hushed, his demeanor guarded, discussing opportunities and returns with an intensity that felt out of place. The financial clues were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but to me, they screamed. They were the breadcrumbs of a hidden life, a secret world he was building, one transaction at a time, outside the confines of our marriage and our shared commitment to philanthropy. And the more I observed, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a casual indiscretion. This was about a deliberate, calculated act of financial deceit, a betrayal that extended far beyond our personal lives and into the very heart of the causes we championed. My gut screamed, but the ingrained trust, the years of shared history, fought back. To suspect Richard, my husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, felt like a betrayal of my own vows. To question his integrity, his dedication to our shared charitable endeavors, felt like a violation of the very principles I held dear, both personally and professionally. I'd lie awake at night, replaying his evasive answers, searching for a flicker of insincerity in his eyes, a hint of deceit in his forced smiles. Each time, I'd rationalize it away. He was stressed. I was stressed. We were just navigating the complexities of a long-term marriage in a demanding world. The self-doubt was a suffocating blanket. Was I becoming one of those paranoid wives, consumed by baseless jealousy, projecting my own insecurities onto a perfect relationship? The thought disgusted me. I prided myself on my rationality, my objectivity, my ability to separate emotion from fact. This gnawing uncertainty felt like a weakness, a betrayal of my own character. I tried harder, planned surprise romantic getaways, suggested charity events we could attend together, bought him thoughtful gifts. Each effort felt hollow, met with a distracted nod or a perfunctory kiss. The distance between us widened, an invisible wall that I desperately tried to breach, unaware that the other side had already been compromised. The perfect marriage facade, once a source of comfort, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping me in a reality I no longer recognized. The more I resisted the urge to snoop, the more the financial clues accumulated, a silent, relentless torrent of data pointing to an undeniable truth. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I couldn't ignore it any longer. My professional ethics warred with my personal anguish, but the need for truth, for clarity, for an end to the agonizing uncertainty began to outweigh everything else. And then there was Dr. Emily Carter, a junior colleague at the hospital, a rising star in the surgical department, and as I would soon discover, the catalyst for the unraveling of my perfect life. I had met her at several hospital functions, a bright, ambitious young woman, always eager to learn, always deferential to Richard. I had even offered her mentorship, seeing in her the potential for a brilliant career. The thought of her, young and seemingly innocent, being involved in something so sordid was almost unthinkable. But the pieces began to fit. The unfamiliar perfume, the late nights, the sudden interest in luxury items, they all pointed to a single undeniable truth. Richard was having an affair, and it was with Emily. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air in the silent, opulent halls of our home. The betrayal was a physical ache, a searing pain that radiated through my entire being. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was the proximity, the audacity, the blatant disregard for our shared professional and personal lives. She was not just a mistress, she was a colleague, a mentee, someone I had welcomed into my world. The thought of them together, in the very spaces we shared, was a torment. The financial clues, once a source of confusion, now made horrifying sense. The lavish gifts, the unexplained expenses, they were for her. He was using our joint charity funds, money meant for the vulnerable, for the sick, to lavish gifts on his mistress. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, the betrayal absolute. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted implicitly, was not just a cheating husband. He was a thief, a manipulator, a man who had desecrated the very principles we held dear. And the path forward seemed impossibly steep, fraught with dangers I couldn't yet comprehend. The annual charity gala. It was our signature event, the culmination of a year's worth of tireless fundraising, a glittering showcase of our dedication to the community. Richard, as a prominent surgeon and a key figure in the charity, was scheduled to deliver the keynote speech, a moment of triumph, a celebration of our shared success. But as the date approached, a different kind of premonition began to settle over me. The gala, once a source of pride, now felt like a stage, a meticulously prepared set for a drama I was about to unleash. The thought of him, standing there, basking in the admiration of the city's elite, while secretly siphoning funds for his illicit affair, was an unbearable hypocrisy. My pain began to morph into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't about a momentary outburst. It was about justice, about reclaiming my life, and about exposing the truth. My grace and composure, often mistaken for meekness, became my greatest assets. I began to envision the gala not as a celebration, but as a reckoning. The large screen behind him, usually reserved for heartwarming videos of our charitable work, would become the canvas for his undoing. The incriminating photos, the financial transactions, they would be projected for all to see, a silent, undeniable testament to his deceit. The irony was not lost on me. He had used the very platform of charity to facilitate his betrayal. I would use the same platform to expose it. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a burning conviction. This was bigger than me. This was about holding power accountable, about protecting the innocent, about transforming our pain into a powerful force for change. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on Richard Hayes' final act. As I meticulously planned my public unveiling, a subtle yet persistent anomaly in the financial records began to surface. Several of the large unexplained expenditures from the charity funds, the ones used to lavish gifts on Emily, were routed through a series of shell corporations that had recently been linked to a controversial medical supply company. A fleeting thought, a whisper of unease, suggested that Richard's affair and his misuse of charity funds weren't just about personal gratification. There were subtle mentions of procurement contracts, of exclusive deals, of kickbacks in his hushed phone calls, all linked to this medical supply company. It looked like Richard's affair and his public persona were not just about personal indiscretion. They were a distraction, a brilliant, cruel smokescreen. While he was busy charming and manipulating Emily and cultivating his image as a prominent surgeon and philanthropist, a far more insidious plot was lurking beneath the surface, a plot to exploit his position to secure lucrative contracts for this medical supply company, potentially at the expense of patient care. The betrayal was a dagger, but these financial breadcrumbs, these brief, unsettling glimpses into a world beyond simple infidelity, felt like a poison, slowly seeping into the very core of my being. It hinted at a deeper, more insidious betrayal, a connection I couldn't yet grasp, but one that promised to unravel far more than just my marriage. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a broken trust on a much grander, more manipulative, and potentially criminal scale, and I had only just scratched the surface of a medical fraud conspiracy. The initial shock of Richard's betrayal, the sickening realization that he was not just cheating, but also misusing charity funds, eventually gave way to a cold, calculated resolve. The pain was immense, a raw wound that throbbed with every memory of our shared life, our shared purpose. But beneath the heartbreak, a steely determination began to form. I knew I couldn't confront him directly. His charm, his public persona, his ability to manipulate would simply turn the narrative against me. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would leave no room for doubt, no space for denial. And I needed to expose him in a way that would resonate, not just with me, but with the community he had so brazenly betrayed. The annual charity gala, our signature event, loomed large on the calendar. It was his stage, his moment of triumph, where he would bask in the admiration of the city's elite. And it was there, I decided, that his carefully constructed world would unravel. The thought of using such a public, high-profile event for such a personal, devastating revelation was daunting. My reputation, my years of dedicated philanthropic work were on the line. But the alternative, allowing him to continue his deceit, to continue misusing funds meant for the vulnerable, to continue living a lie, was unthinkable. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about justice, about protecting the integrity of the causes I championed, and about reclaiming my life from the shadow of his deceit. The decision was made. The gala would be his reckoning, and I, the quiet philanthropist, would be the architect of his downfall. My pain transformed into a laser-like focus. I began a meticulous investigation, a quiet, relentless pursuit of the truth. My years of managing large charitable organizations had equipped me with a keen eye for financial discrepancies, a methodical approach to data analysis. I started with our joint bank accounts, cross-referencing every withdrawal, every transfer, every expense with his known activities. The luxury purchases, the unexplained travel, the lavish dinners, they all began to form a disturbing pattern. I discreetly hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Mark Jensen, whose reputation for discretion and thoroughness was impeccable. I provided him with the initial financial clues, the names of the shell corporations, the suspicious transactions. His task was simple: confirm the affair, gather photographic evidence, and trace the flow of the misused charity funds. He worked in the shadows, a silent extension of my will, providing me with a steady stream of damning evidence. Photos of Richard and Emily, hand in hand, entering exclusive restaurants, leaving luxury hotels, receipts for designer gifts, expensive jewelry, all purchased with funds clearly diverted from our joint charity accounts. The evidence mounted, a horrifying chronicle of his deceit. Each new piece of information, each confirmation of his systematic betrayal, chipped away at the last vestiges of my affection of Richard, replacing it with a cold, steely determination. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated act of financial fraud, a blatant disregard for the trust placed in him by the community. And I, the quiet philanthropist, was gathering the ammunition to expose him, not with emotional outbursts, but with irrefutable facts. The annual charity gala. It was the crown jewel of our philanthropic year, a glittering spectacle attended by the city's most influential figures, prominent donors, and media. Richard, as a prominent surgeon and a key figure in the charity, was scheduled to deliver the keynote speech, a moment of triumph, a celebration of our shared success. The grand ballroom, adorned with flowers and shimmering lights, would be packed with hundreds of guests, all eager to hear his eloquent words, to bask in the glow of his supposed benevolence. The stage, with its massive projection screen, was the focal point, usually reserved for heartwarming videos of our charitable work, testimonials from those we had helped, and inspiring messages of hope. But this year, it would serve a different purpose. It would be the canvas for his undoing. I had personally overseen every detail of the gala, from the seating arrangements to the menu, ensuring that every element was perfectly in place for the dramatic unveiling. I had even arranged for a last-minute technical check of the projection system, ensuring that I would have direct access to the controls. The irony was not lost on me. He had used the very platform of charity to facilitate his betrayal. I would use the same platform to expose it. The stage was set, not for a celebration but for a reckoning, and I, the quiet philanthropist, would be the architect of his downfall, using his own carefully constructed image against him. The incriminating evidence was a chaotic mess of photos, financial statements, and private investigator reports. My challenge was to transform this raw data into a compelling, undeniable narrative, one that would expose Richard's deceit without resorting to sensationalism. I spent countless hours meticulously organizing the evidence, creating a slideshow that would appear, at first glance, to be a typical charity presentation. The initial slides would feature images of our charitable work, heartwarming photos of beneficiaries, and statistics on our impact, all designed to lull the audience into a false sense of security. Then, subtly, almost imperceptibly, the narrative would shift. A photo of Richard, seemingly innocent, would transition to a photo of him with Emily, then to a financial transaction showing a large sum transferred to an unfamiliar account. Each slide would build on the last, a carefully constructed sequence of images and numbers that would tell a story of betrayal, of misused funds, of a double life. I worked with a trusted graphic designer, someone who had no idea of my true intentions, instructing them to create a seamless, professional-looking presentation. The technical aspects were crucial. I needed to ensure that the incriminating slides would appear at precisely the right moment during Richard's keynote speech, when his words of integrity and dedication would be most sharply contrasted with the images of his deceit. It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of timing and precision. The presentation was not just a collection of facts, it was a weapon, designed to deliver a devastating blow to his reputation, to expose the rot beneath his polished facade. And as I crafted it, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation, knowing that the outcome would irrevocably alter the course of his life and mine. The moment arrived. The ballroom buzzed with anticipation as Richard, impeccably dressed, took the stage for his keynote speech. He began with his usual charm, his voice resonating with authority, speaking of the charity's mission, its impact, its unwavering commitment to ethical leadership. The initial slides of the presentation, heartwarming images of our work, played seamlessly behind him, reinforcing his message. I stood in the wings, my heart pounding, my hands clammy, but my resolve unwavering. This was it, my moment. As he reached the crescendo of his speech, extolling the virtues of integrity and trust, I subtly activated the hidden sequence. The screen behind him flickered, and then the first incriminating image appeared. A photo of Richard and Emily, their faces too close, their smiles too intimate. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Richard faltered, his voice catching in his throat. He glanced back, his eyes widening in dawning horror as the next slide appeared. A financial transaction, a large sum diverted from the charity fund, clearly marked as a gift for Emily. The whispers grew louder, a buzzing chorus of shock and disbelief. Richard's face drained of color, his usual composure replaced by a look of utter terror. He tried to regain control, to dismiss it as a technical glitch, but the images kept coming, a relentless barrage of undeniable proof. More photos, more financial transactions, more evidence of his illicit activities and the misuse of funds. The elegant facade of his life, his career, his marriage, shattered into a million irreparable pieces, exposed for the world to see. The public, once enamored by his image, now recoiled in horror and disgust. The whispers in the ballroom had become a roar, and Richard Hayes's carefully guarded secrets were now laid bare for all to witness. The silence that followed his final, choked words was deafening, broken only by the click of camera shutters and the frantic murmurs of the stunned crowd. The unveiling was complete, and the truth, in all its devastating clarity, had set me free. As the scandal erupted, and the media frenzy began to consume Richard's life, a subtle, yet persistent anomaly in the financial records continued to nag at me. The shell corporations used to rout the misused charity funds, the ones linked to the controversial medical supply company, weren't just random entities. They were part of a larger, more intricate network of companies, all connected to a powerful, shadowy pharmaceutical conglomerate. A fleeting thought, a whisper of unease, suggested that Richard's affair and his misuse of charity funds weren't just about personal gratification. There were subtle mentions of clinical trials, of drug approvals, of regulatory bypasses in his hushed phone calls, all linked to this pharmaceutical conglomerate. It looked like Richard's affair and his public persona were not just about personal indiscretion. They were a distraction, a brilliant, cruel smokescreen. While he was busy charming and manipulating Emily and cultivating his image as a prominent surgeon and philanthropist, a far more insidious plot was lurking beneath the surface. A plot to exploit his position to secure lucrative contracts for this pharmaceutical conglomerate, potentially at the expense of patient safety and ethical medical practices. The betrayal was a dagger, but these financial breadcrumbs, these brief, unsettling glimpses into a world beyond simple infidelity, felt like a poison, slowly seeping into the very core of my being. It hinted at a deeper, more insidious betrayal, a connection I couldn't yet grasp, but one that promised to unravel far more than just my marriage. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a broken trust on a much grander, more manipulative, and potentially criminal scale. And I had only just scratched the surface of a medical fraud and pharmaceutical conspiracy. The moment the incriminating images flashed across the screen, the elegant ballroom transformed into a scene of chaos. A collective gasp, then a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and the frantic click of camera shutters. Richard, frozen on stage, his face a mask of dawning horror, was no longer the esteemed surgeon, the philanthropic leader. He was a man exposed, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before the eyes of the city's elite. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal. News crews, initially there to cover the gala, scrambled to capture the unfolding drama. The story went viral within minutes, dominating headlines and social media feeds. Prominent surgeon exposed in charity scandal, philanthropist's affair and fund misuse revealed at Gala. The headlines screamed, each one a fresh stab to his carefully cultivated image. The hospital, quick to distance itself from the scandal, issued a terse statement announcing his immediate suspension pending a full investigation. His medical license, his career, his entire professional life hung by a thread. His colleagues, who had once admired his skill and dedication, now looked at him with a mixture of shock, disgust, and betrayal. The very institution he had served with such apparent distinction was now reeling from the public disgrace he had brought upon it. His public speaking engagements were canceled, his board positions revoked, and his name, once synonymous with healing and generosity, became a byword for deceit and hypocrisy. The calls from his legal team began almost immediately, frantic and desperate, but there was little they could do. The evidence, presented so subtly, yet so undeniably, was irrefutable. The public, once enamored by his charm, now recoiled in horror and disgust. The whispers in the ballroom had become a roar, and Richard Hayes's carefully guarded secrets were now laid bare for all to witness. The fall from grace was absolute, a fitting consequence for his calculated greed and betrayal. He had sought to ruin my life. Instead, he had ruined himself, professionally, socially, and personally. Richard's downfall was a spectacle of public humiliation, a brutal reckoning for years of deceit. He tried to regain control, to dismiss the presentation as a technical glitch, a malicious hack, but his words rang hollow against the overwhelming evidence. His attempts at damage control, his desperate pleas for understanding, were met with a relentless barrage of truth and public condemnation. The media, which had once lauded him, now tore him apart, dissecting every detail of his illicit dealings, every victim he had exploited. His former associates, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, publicly condemned him, painting him as a predator who had used his position of trust to enrich himself. His social circle, once vast and influential, evaporated overnight. Invitations to exclusive events ceased. His phone, once constantly buzzing with calls from admirers and colleagues, now rang only with the demands of his lawyers and the accusations of his creditors. He became a pariah, a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked greed and moral decay. I watched, not with glee, but with a grim satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring that his manipulative tactics, his predatory behavior, would never again find fertile ground. The public had spoken, and their verdict was clear: guilty. His carefully curated image, the one he had used to deceive so many, was now irrevocably shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of his character. The hospital launched a full internal investigation, uncovering more instances of his financial impropriety, his questionable medical practices, and his blatant disregard for ethical guidelines. The evidence mounted, painting a picture of a man who had systematically abused his position of power for personal gain, all under the guise of philanthropy and medical excellence. His medical license, once a symbol of his dedication, was now under review, his future as a surgeon hanging by a thread. The fall from grace was absolute, a fitting consequence for his calculated greed and betrayal. He had sought to ruin my life. Instead, he had ruined himself, financially, socially, and personally. Dr. Emily Carter, the junior colleague, the mistress, found herself caught in the crossfire of Richard's public downfall. Her involvement in the affair, initially a secret, was now laid bare for the world to see. The public, fueled by outrage, turned their attention to her, dissecting her role in the scandal. Her career, once promising, was now in tatters. The hospital, in its efforts to clean house, suspended her, pending their own internal investigation. Her colleagues, who had once seen her as a rising star, now viewed her with a mixture of pity and contempt. The public shaming was profound. Social media, once a platform for her professional achievements, became a relentless torrent of condemnation. She was branded a homewrecker, a gold digger, a woman who had used her position to exploit a married man. The lavish gifts, the expensive trips, the financial transactions, all now public knowledge, fueling the narrative of her complicity. Richard, in his desperation, tried to shift all blame onto her, painting her as the manipulative temptress who had led him astray. But the evidence, the photos, the financial records told a different story. She was not just a mistress. She was a willing participant, a beneficiary of his illicit activities. The consequences were severe. Her professional reputation was destroyed, Her career prospects vanished, and her personal life became a public spectacle. She was abandoned by Richard, who, in his self-preservation, cut all ties, leaving her to face the consequences alone. The poetic justice of it was not lost on me. She had gained nothing but a ruined reputation, and in her ambition, she sealed her own professional and personal demise. The once promising young doctor, now a pariah, a cautionary tale for those who sought shortcuts to success. Her fall from grace, though less dramatic than Richard's, was equally devastating, leaving her with nothing but the bitter taste of public shame and a future devoid of the respect she once craved. Amidst the chaos of Richard's downfall, I maintained my grace and composure, a quiet strength that resonated deeply with the public. I issued no public statements, granted no interviews, and made no emotional outbursts. My actions at the gala spoke louder than any words could. The public, initially shocked by the scandal, quickly shifted their admiration to me. My quiet dignity, my unwavering commitment to the charity, and my stoic demeanor in the face of such profound betrayal earned me a new level of respect and solidarity. Messages of support poured in from across the city, from strangers, from colleagues, from fellow philanthropists. They saw not a vengeful wife, but a woman of integrity, a victim who had bravely exposed the truth. My platform, once shared with Richard, was now solely mine, and I used it to advocate for ethical leadership, for transparency in charitable organizations, and for the protection of vulnerable funds. I spoke at conferences, consulted with other nonprofits, and became a voice for those who had been silenced by deceit. The media, which had initially sensationalized the scandal, now portrayed me as a symbol of resilience, a woman who had transformed her pain into a powerful force for good. The vindication was profound, a testament to the power of truth. I was no longer just Dr. Richard Hayes' wife. I was Lisa, a woman who had stood up for herself, who had dared to expose the truth no matter the cost. My quiet strength, my unwavering commitment to justice, and my ability to navigate such a public ordeal with such grace earned me not just public admiration, but a profound sense of personal empowerment. I was rebuilding my life, not on the ruins of his, but on a foundation of integrity, authenticity, and a renewed sense of purpose. While the public spectacle of Richard's downfall unfolded, I quietly secured my financial future, ensuring that his reckless actions would not leave me vulnerable. My years of experience in managing large charitable funds had given me a keen understanding of financial structures, of asset protection, and of the legal intricacies of high net worth divorces. I had already taken proactive steps, consulting with my legal team to ensure a swift and clean separation of assets. The evidence of his financial impropriety, his misuse of charity funds, and his lavish spending on Emily was irrefutable. It left him with no legal recourse, no leverage, no room for negotiation. The divorce proceedings were swift, almost clinical. There were no protracted battles, no messy public disputes. The evidence spoke for itself, and his legal team, faced with the undeniable truth, advised him to concede. I secured full control of our shared assets, ensuring that the funds meant for charity were recovered and that my personal financial stability was protected. My focus was on disentangling my life from his, severing every tie that bound me to his deceit. I changed my routines, my social circles, even my personal investments, creating a new, unburdened existence. The quiet securing of my financial future was not an act of vengeance, but an act of self-preservation. I was reclaiming my life, piece by painful piece, from the wreckage of his betrayal. The process was not without its emotional cost, but the clarity of purpose, the knowledge that I was acting with integrity and truth, provided a strange sense of peace. I was rebuilding my life, not on the ruins of his, but on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. The public exposure had not only revealed his truth, but had also liberated me, allowing me to move forward, free from the deceit that had poisoned my life for so long. As I immersed myself in my new role as an advocate for ethical leadership, working tirelessly to ensure transparency in charitable organizations, a subtle yet persistent anomaly in the financial records continued to nag at me. The shell corporations used to route the misused charity funds, the ones linked to the controversial medical supply company, weren't just random entities. They were part of a larger, more intricate network of companies, all connected to a powerful, shadowy pharmaceutical conglomerate. A fleeting thought, a whisper of unease, suggested that Richard's affair and his misuse of charity funds weren't just about personal gratification. There were subtle mentions of clinical trials, of drug approvals, of regulatory bypasses in his hushed phone calls, all linked to this pharmaceutical conglomerate. It looked like Richard's affair and his public persona were not just about personal indiscretion. They were a distraction, a brilliant, cruel smokescreen. While he was busy charming and manipulating Emily and cultivating his image as a prominent surgeon and philanthropist, a far more insidious plot was lurking beneath the surface. A plot to exploit his position to secure lucrative contracts for this medical supply company, potentially at the expense of patient safety and ethical medical practices. The betrayal was a dagger, but these financial breadcrumbs, these brief, unsettling glimpses into a world beyond simple infidelity, felt like a poison, slowly seeping into the very core of my being. It hinted at a deeper, more insidious betrayal, a connection I couldn't yet grasp, but one that promised to unravel far more than just my marriage. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a broken trust on a much grander, more manipulative, and potentially criminal scale, and I had only just scratched the surface of a medical fraud and pharmaceutical conspiracy. The public humiliation of Richard, his immediate suspension, and the full-blown investigation into his financial dealings sent shockwaves through the city. For me, the immediate aftermath was a complex tapestry of relief, vindication, and a profound sense of responsibility. The house, once our shared sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum of shattered dreams. I sold it, eager to shed every last vestige of a past that had become a lie. The process was painful, a constant excavation of emotional debris, but each step forward, no matter how small, felt like a victory. I was shedding the old skin, preparing for a new beginning, a new chapter built on authenticity and truth. The initial storm of sensationalism eventually subsided, replaced by a quiet, determined resolve within me. The public exposure was a crucial first step, a necessary act of personal justice, but the true work of rebuilding, of healing, had just begun. And this time, I was building on a foundation of genuine connection, not hidden agendas. Richard's downfall was absolute. His medical license was revoked, his assets frozen, and he faced multiple lawsuits from the charity and other affected parties. Emily Carter, too, faced professional ruin, her career prospects vanished, and her name synonymous with scandal. The city, once so eager to celebrate Richard, now recoiled from him, his name a byword for deceit. I watched, not with glee, but with a grim satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring that his manipulative tactics, his predatory behavior, would never again find fertile ground. The public had spoken, and their verdict was clear: guilty. His carefully curated image, the one he had used to deceive so many, was now irrevocably shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of his character. The fall from grace was absolute, a fitting consequence for his calculated deceit and betrayal. He had sought to ruin my life. Instead, he had ruined himself professionally, socially, and personally. Healing, I discovered, not a linear path. It was a winding road with unexpected detours into grief, anger, and profound sadness. The emotional scars of betrayal ran deep, but I was determined not to let them define my future. I sought professional help, engaging with a therapist who guided me through the labyrinth of shattered trust and emotional trauma. It was a difficult, often painful process, but essential for true recovery. I reconnected with old friends, those who had stood by me, offering unwavering support without judgment. I rediscovered passions I had long neglected, finding solace in long walks in nature, the quiet contemplation of art, and the challenge of learning a new skill. My story, once a private torment, became a beacon of hope for countless others trapped in similar webs of deceit. I used my newfound freedom to delve deeper into my philanthropic work, focusing on ethical leadership and transparency in charitable organizations, helping victims of financial abuse and exploitation. My voice, once silenced by fear, now resonated with strength and purpose. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was building a new purpose, a new community dedicated to truth and liberation. The transformation was profound, not just for me, but for the countless individuals who found their own voices through mine. The charity Gala, once a source of my pain, had become the catalyst for my greatest personal triumph, a testament to the enduring power of integrity and the strength of the human spirit. I learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize the subtle signs of manipulation, and to value authenticity above all else. My journey was far from over, but I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a warrior, armed with the truth and a renewed sense of self-worth. The quiet securing of my assets, the methodical filing for divorce, were not acts of vengeance, but acts of self-preservation. I was reclaiming my life, piece by painful piece, from the wreckage of his betrayal. The process was not without its emotional cost, but the clarity of purpose, the knowledge that I was acting with integrity and truth, provided a strange sense of peace. I was rebuilding my life, not on the ruins of his, but on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. The public exposure had not only revealed his truth, but had also liberated me, allowing me to move forward, free from the deceit that had poisoned my life for so long. As I immersed myself in my new role as an advocate for ethical leadership, working tirelessly to ensure transparency in charitable organizations, the subtle yet persistent anomaly in the financial records continued to nag at me. The shell corporations used to route the misused charity funds, the ones linked to the controversial medical supply company, weren't just random entities. They were part of a larger, more intricate network of companies, all connected to a powerful, shadowy pharmaceutical conglomerate. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Richard's infidelity or his personal deceit. This was a far grander, more insidious scheme, a global network of medical fraud. And Richard, I realized with a sickening lurch, was not just a participant. He was a key operative, a highly skilled facilitator. We uncovered a labyrinthine web of fake clinical trials, manipulated drug approvals, and illicit kickbacks, all designed to push dangerous, unproven drugs onto the market, often at the expense of patient safety. The charity, with its vast network of vulnerable patients and its access to sensitive medical data, was not just a cover, it was a front. The intimate photos she had shared, the flirtatious messages, the emotional vulnerabilities she had exposed, they were not just about personal gratification. They were a calculated tactic, a brilliant, cruel smokescreen to gain trust, to extract information, to exploit human weaknesses for illicit gains. The depth of their depravity was staggering, far beyond a simple affair or personal betrayal. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a broken trust on a much grander, more manipulative, and potentially criminal scale. And I had only just scratched the surface of a medical fraud and pharmaceutical conspiracy that threatened to compromise public health and exploit vulnerable patients. Richard, I now understood, was not just a cheating husband. He was a medical predator, a highly skilled operative in a global network of pharmaceutical criminals, and his infidelity was merely a tool in his arsenal. Suddenly, every seemingly innocuous detail, every fleeting moment of unease, coalesced into a terrifyingly clear picture. Richard's late nights, his evasive answers, his unusual expenses, not just signs of infidelity, but the meticulous operational security of a seasoned criminal. The new apps on his phone, the obscure folders, not just personal interests, but specialized tools for encrypted communication and data manipulation. The subtle mentions of clinical trials, of drug approvals, of regulatory bypasses in his hushed phone calls. Not just casual banter, but coded language for illicit operations. The hints I had dismissed as mere red flags of infidelity were in fact breadcrumbs leading to a vast criminal enterprise, a global network of medical fraud and pharmaceutical corruption. The shadowy pharmaceutical conglomerate, with its impenetrable legal teams and its highly skilled operatives, was the key. It was the nexus where personal betrayal blurred with the darkest corners of the medical underworld. Richard, I now understood, was not just a cheating husband. He was a highly trained operative, a facilitator par excellence, using his charm and his position to push dangerous drugs and manipulate clinical trials. He had used his impeccable reputation as a surgeon, his seemingly altruistic motives, and even the emotional vulnerabilities of his patients as a shield for his illicit gains. He had played me, the charity, and countless others like puppets on a string, all for the ultimate prize, vast sums of illicit profits and unchecked power in the medical realm. My initial triumph over him felt hollow, replaced by a cold, simmering rage at the audacity of this global scheme, its manipulative genius. They hadn't just cheated me, they had used me, exploited my trust, and turned my life into a stage for their criminal enterprise. But now, I had the knowledge. I had the true blueprint of their systemic deception. And this time, my retribution would be far more devastating, far more permanent. The game wasn't over. It had just entered a new, far more dangerous phase, one that would expose not just Richard, but the entire network of corrupt individuals who had helped this pharmaceutical conglomerate build its empire on a foundation of medical fraud and human exploitation. I stood before the assembled press, the glare of the cameras illuminating the intricate web of connections, the hidden truths of a global conspiracy. The secrets, once buried in the shadows of corporate greed, now screamed from every line of the indictment. The truth, once a whisper, was now a roar. They thought they had won. They thought they had gotten away with it. But they had underestimated me. They had underestimated the power of a philanthropist scorned and the collective strength of a community united by truth. And they had forgotten one crucial detail. In the world of integrity, every lie, every manipulated trial eventually leaves a trace. And some secrets, once unearthed, refuse to stay buried. They fester, they twist, and they will always, always find their way back to the surface. Because the real game, the one they never saw coming, has only just begun. And this time, there will be no escape. Not for Richard, not for Emily. Not for the pharmaceutical conglomerate, not for anyone involved. The blueprint for their systemic destruction is now complete, and I'm ready to expose every single line of their hidden code. Are you ready to see what happens when the medical underworld reveals its darkest secrets?